We're live. Aidan LaBreche, welcome to the podcast, my man.
You're gonna have to
Maybe
restart
did I
that.
pronounce
Completely
it wrong?
butchered my name.
Can you repronounce it? And also
Oh,
just
that's
go
fine.
off that and give yourself an introduction.
Yeah.
Apologies, brother.
Jack Mosesi. Yeah, my name's Aidan LaBreche. Yeah, I started writing on Twitter a couple of years ago. Signed my first clients there. Ended up growing a little agency off the back end, doing some appointment setting and ghostwriting. Hit that fabled 10K a month that everybody kind of dreams about. Ended up working with someone by the name of Andrew Kirby, who is involved in school and has a school community called Synthesizer. And that eventually resulted in me hosting the community Synthesizer. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm just community host and working in the creator economy full time.
Dope. Well, yeah, we have so much to go into with the creator economy, but I want to know more about Synthesizer. So what is the community Synthesizer about, and what do you actually do within that community?
Yeah, great place to start. And maybe the best place to start is what even does synthesizer mean? And to us, that means someone who solves problems and shares solutions. That is what we define synthesizing as. When you're synthesizing, you're going out, you're maybe consuming information, you're repackaging it up, you're curating it, and you're solving problems in your own life or in other people's lives, and then sharing the solution. And we think that's kind of the fundamentals of business, of educational creator businesses, solving problems and sharing the solutions. And that's what the community is about. It's about building businesses for educational creators and kind of growing through that. Yeah.
Dope. And what do you do within Synthesizer? Like, what is your unique role? And how did you first start working with Kirby? How did that even arise?
Another good question. Well, I used to have a school community called X Order, and it was about helping people grow and start business on Twitter. It's something that I had done, right? And Kirby, funny enough, joined that community, became a member of it. And in that moment, when I saw it, I'm like, a little alarm bell dinged in my head. I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity. Someone who's a bit ahead of me, who's maybe a ways ahead of me. When you see that opportunity to connect with someone, I just dropped what I was doing and took advantage of it. And I remember I was like going out to soccer practice at the time. I was training football for the Europeans here and not American football. And I just like dropped my bag and I ran back into my room to my laptop and I just started working again, skipped practice, started doing free work for the guy, helping him out any way I could, optimizing some of his posts, helping him with hooks, ideas, content. And I think I managed to prove myself a little bit over a few weeks. He kept coming back to me, asking me questions. We kept talking, networking. Eventually made him an offer to start working together. He became a client of mine. From there, I just had a project I called Project Indispensable, Become Indispensable, and found any way I could to be helpful, to be useful. And it eventually evolved into him asking me to start hosting the community that he was running, which started as just helping, write posts and moderate and things like that. Then became building the course that we have as the backbone of the community, the Synthesizer roadmap, we call it. And then evolved into hosting calls on the calendar, events, and that's basically where it's at now, where I'm taking care of running the community, growing, and then, of course, scaling it up a little bit. Yeah.
I would love to dive a little bit more into the nuances of the community. So, this is an interesting episode because it might be a little bit more technical and a little bit more business oriented, which I love getting into that. I mean, so many of my podcasts have been like so esoteric, so spiritual, but this is it's actually a reflection of myself right now, coming back to practicality, productivity, creator economy, business, community building, cohort launching, etc. So
nice.
I'm really excited to dive into this. And I think for the people out there listening, like, you are a wealth of knowledge in this space. Even if you're not that well known yet, you're well known within these circles that like, they're like, oh yeah, he's a really smart dude. At least that's my personal perception. So really excited about this conversation in general, but I would love to go into the nuances of that community. So you mentioned a few things, and this is for anybody out there who wants to create a community. I think it's one of the highest ROI, highest leverage brand building plays. It's something that's in the works for me right now. But you talked about there's a course, a synthesizer roadmap, there's calls, there is community moderation and chats. So what do you see as somebody who's been in this space is like the ingredients of a community that lead it to being successful versus the ones that die out? What are those key ingredients?
It's a good question, and you can kind of, and you're making me blush with the compliments, by the way, earlier, starting out strong here. But I'd say there's technical sides of a community where you look at things like the classroom. There's a course. There's something that helps people get out of their current situation and achieve a desired situation, transformation, overcoming problems they might have along the way. Something that's preferably action-based and pretty done for you, so they don't have to think too much and kind of just take action and achieve a result. And then there's stuff like the calendar where you host calls designed to be, again, helpful, useful, insightful, unique, things like that. And then there's the community, the chats where people can connect with each other, create posts, get feedback, comment on other people's posts, things like that. That's the technical side of a community. The truth is a lot of communities can have those technical sides and still not be a community. And I think too many people sometimes focus on those technical sides. And yes, you mentioned a community is a great asset. But for the viewers who are just starting out, figuring things out, I'd be wary of it, because a lot of the times people think, oh, I need to build a course. I need to build a community. I need to sell a membership. And in reality, they haven't maybe done anything worth building that around yet. And maybe they're not the person who should be doing that yet. And me starting out, I never built courses or communities. I worked on acquiring the skills and repeating processes over and over again with clients one-on-one, until that information became so ingrained that I could do it over and over again. And the same with Kirby. He's done it for years upon years of doing the same processes over and over again, dialing them in, so that eventually, when you look back over years of work, you can put it together into a streamlined roadmap that makes sense in a course, for example. But when we have like these people who are kind of beginners and they see those others ahead of them starting to build courses and communities and think, oh, that's the path forward. If that's what they're doing and they have the life I want to live, I should be doing that too. Say, be careful, be wary, because courses are very scalable, but they're very hard to make good. And I'd say it might be a better ROI in your time to get good, to do the work, to maybe even charge higher ticket prices and work one-on-one with people and develop your processes so that when you do build the course and the community, it's actually new and insightful, and that will make that community base so much better and more vibrant. So that's just something I'd bring up first. Questions might you have about that?
Yeah, we can go back into the aspects of a community that are powerful, but I think that's a great little side tangent for beginners. Is when you're starting off and you don't have an audience and you don't have credibility and you don't have a reputation, it's very hard to sell courses and make a full-time living, right? And so the path I went and the path you went was freelancing, client acquisition. You went to go build an actual agency. I'm going to stay at 2 to 3 clients and then build my own things on the side. But the first step to digital freedom was acquiring the skills for me, ghostwriting, marketing, email writing, copywriting, etc. Networking, I think, is a skill. To have the skill set, reputation, and network to make $4,000 to $7,000 a month with 2 or 3 full-time high-ticket ghostwriting clients, to then go start to build my own stuff. Whereas if I had just started building a performance course or a creator cohort without having that, 1, credibility, and 2, time freedom that I gained from the freelancing work, it wouldn't have been possible. So I think it's a great first step. Like, how can you get to freedom as quickly as possible? And it's usually going to be a high ticket client with some type of service. So maybe it could be helpful for people. And then we'll go back into the community stuff. What was your roadmap to that 10K a month, right? That number that everybody talks about.
Yeah. That 10K a month is that kind of like fabled dream that a lot of people kind of fixate their sights on starting out. And funny enough, once you get into the industry, and you start working in it for a few years, you kind of realize how small it is and how small some people think in terms of what's possible in the creator economy. But I think you nailed it in the sense that is the path to full time and kind of unlocking your true freedom, your true passions, and figuring out what you really want to do. And I'd say in regards to that path, I think in terms of a story, a lot of people see it as like maybe a mountain peak, right? They're looking and they see that 10K a month peak that they want to reach. And they ask themselves, okay, what's the most direct line I can take to them? They just start trying to walk directly up the side of the mountain to the peak, to the viewpoint. And in reality, you know, for you, for me, for most other people who actually do reach those goals, the path kind of wanders and meanders, and it might loop around this way, and then it comes up this way, and you might lose sight of the peak for a little bit, and then you come around and you realize that the path was bringing you there the whole way, but you're not walking directly there because you'd be running into trees, falling off cliffs. And when you have just the goal in mind, it's kind of easy to get lost and just think about how can I sell and what should I pick? And you kind of end up picking like a very narrow, specific niche. Like I decide I'm going to help X person achieve X result and charge X price. And if I do that and sign 5 people, I'll reach 10K a month. And it's like walking straight up that mountainside. You're just running into trees, falling off cliffs. And in reality, I think what you need to do is when you connect with people, you need to actually start asking yourself, what problems can I solve? You know, when you start networking, for you and me, you know, we both did some ghostwriting work. And, you know, for that appointment setting side of things, I met someone who just mentioned they hated doing DMs, right? Oh, I hate doing it. And I just started the conversation naturally and out of curiosity. And then I discovered they have this problem, and I kind of walked the path, talking to them, helping them discover a problem, and then try and be useful, you know, try and be useful in the sense of defining usefulness as helping someone overcome their problem and kind of reach that desired situation. And if you do that and you just find ways to be useful and in that way provide value, then you can kind of find ways to start charging and start walking up that mountain and get your first client, maybe your second. And then you start defining, okay, multiple people seem to be having this common problem and I can help them with this common thing. And that becomes your niche and that becomes who you help. Instead of starting with that in mind first, you kind of discover it along the way. Does that make sense?
It's a great point. And you have me reflecting back 2 years when this mountain climbing was happening.
Yeah.
And I look back and I want to almost just simplify it and say it was a simple path. I started writing online, got 3 ghostwriting clients and dropped out of college and moved to Argentina.
Yeah.
In actuality, it's not what happened. In actuality, I took a side path of, a podcast is interesting. Maybe I should try that. Okay, I connect with this guy named Jason Levin, who's a ghostwriter for venture capitalist founders in the Web3 and crypto space. And he's like, you're a good writer. Like, can you help me with some threads? So I start writing threads for $80 a piece, $80 a piece. And then from there, I go into Dakota's ghostwriting cohort and start writing for him a little bit, $200 a week, whatever. And then those things come together with my own writing, a podcast to network, and little side projects here and there that come together to, a referral from a former podcast guest to do a full-time client, or a former podcast guest sees my brand grow and knows of my reputation. He has a problem of writing content. Cool, I can help solve it. So I love how you're adding these nuanced variables to people for beginners, because the path is not linear, though it may appear linear, or we might want to say it's linear in hindsight.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think that podcasting was your way of attracting people to network with, right? And it was networking. That's what it was. And for me, networking was like simplified as comments, chats, and calls, right? It's one thing we bring up in the Synthesizer roadmap that I talked about earlier. And it's like, that's one of the ways of getting in touch with people and discovering those ways to help. And because you had that podcast as your focal point for kind of driving attention to and meeting people, that allowed you to get in contact with people who you might not otherwise have gotten in contact with. And then you talk to them, you kind of proved yourself a little bit, you built trust and credibility and authority you can only do to that level on a face-to-face conversation. And because of that, they were then willing to give you a chance and say, I have this problem. Maybe Jack can help me with it. Let me ask him about it, right?
Beautiful. Yeah, so I would love to maybe dive back into Synthesizer. So you mentioned a lot of times what people do wrong when building a community, but for the communities that are successful, like let's say Synthesizer, what aspects of it do you feel make it a community that people are actively engaged with, joining regularly, retaining? Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what do you see behind the scenes as the secret sauce or the important ingredients behind a successful community?
Yeah, it's a good question. And speaking on the technical terms we spoke about earlier, a lot of people focus on that and they think, oh, if I have a classroom, a calendar, a community place to chat, I have a community, all I need to do is drive traffic to it. And I've seen it happen so many times where they have those pillars and people drive traffic to it. They get members, thousands of members even. And then those people join and they never come back because they don't have a reason to. And one thing that we found, first of all, is just like a shared purpose, having a reason for even existing in the first place. And one of our reasons is that educational creators have the power to change the world. That's something we firmly believe. And I think a lot of people believe that as well. If you look at the creator economy, there's different types of content. There's people who are kind of distractors, they distract you, they give you cheap dopamine. Their goal is to just get you to consume and keep consuming. And that type of content hurts you. You feel like shit after consuming it. You scroll for 5 minutes and the next thing you know, an hour passes and you're like, fuck, what am I doing with my life? And you just hate it. So that's like the negative side. But then the positive side is if you consume something and it like changes the way you perceive the world, or it changes your actions, like defining change as a change in action, change in behavior. And when you can change someone's behavior through something they consume, like content, that is how you have the power to change the world, right? Like you can impact someone on the other side of the world through something you post online. And we kind of believe that educational creators have that power, and we want to enable and empower people to share their gifts with the world. And another thing we have that really resonated with people, just one slide in one of the modules we talked about, and it was like, do you hear the whisper of your soul? And I think a lot of people see that and they think, oh, I'm working a 9 to 5, or I came into this community with kind of like an idea of I want to start a business. I don't know. And they see that visualization of, do you hear the whisper of your soul? And they think, yeah, when I was younger, I always kind of thought I was put on this earth for a reason. I didn't think I was designed to work a 9 to 5. I think most people listening to this, they ask themselves, they don't think they were designed to work a 9 to 5 their whole life, to just exist as a cog in society. So when we speak to those things, those little hints of dreams in people's souls, and we say, we are also like you. We're not above you. We're not better than you. We're just like you. And we're on this path together towards this maybe higher calling. That brings people together. We're like, I resonate with that. I feel like that shared purpose is something that inspires me. And we find that that's like one thing that really impacts how people retain and communicate in the community. Another thing, Hormozi's talked about this, is there's a difference between an audience and a community, right? Where an audience is like one person speaking to many, where there's only one line of connection. It's the person to the creator. And a community, there's the owner or the founder or the creator, the leaders of the community. And then there's connections within people, within the community. And when you can build those connections and foster those connections where people attribute the connections and the network they're building with others in the community, and they start coming back, not for you, but for the other people in the community, I think that is another thing that builds community. So anything you can do to foster that. And of course, there's more technical things, like in terms of onboarding, you need to activate people, make sure they actually show up, and maybe encourage them and give them a reason to make their first post or sign up to the first call or show up. And if they don't, maybe you remind them and say, hey, we missed you, and actually show you care. There's things like that also matter. But I think the fundamentals are two things that if I had to nail them and just say these are really important, are that shared purpose and that sense of connection between members.
Incredible. Man, you're giving away some real gems, like maybe more than you realize. And I mean, I have ideas floating around for my own stuff, which is really exciting. But I want to still keep this focus on you for now. We can shift it to my visions if that feels right. But for you, first of all, I love the shared purpose and the whisper of your soul. Like that touched me deeply. I like felt I almost felt tears arising for half a second, because it speaks to me even now, but also 2-3 years ago when I joined the creator economy so deeply. It was the whisper of my soul that there could be more to life than I am programmed to believe, that led me into this game in the first place and completely changed my life. And so, on the surface, it looks like, creator economy community on school, it's just a way to make money. No, like there's depth there too. And I appreciate that a lot, and I feel it, and I really feel it. But that's the shared purpose you shared. I'm curious about your current perspective on individual purpose, right? So I know this is something that was really big in your old community, right? Like having a purpose-driven brand, I believe you were talking about. So at this current stage, what do you feel like your purpose for being is, your reason for being, and how has that evolved and changed over time?
My purpose for being, something I should probably spend time reflecting on.
Well, we got time right now.
Well, I think when I started out, for me, I felt that whisper of my soul calling me to do something more, something greater when I was in a hospital bed, right? You know this story. I've talked about this story. For the people who might not know, the thing that got me into the creator economy was getting Crohn's disease and getting really sick. Just to touch on it briefly. And I think a lot of people never get there. And at first, a lot of people never start because they never really listen to that whisper, because there's too many fears and things in the way of it, and too many chains and handcuffs holding them back from that. So that was my chance to actually listen to it and give me an opportunity to go all in. And at that time, my purpose was, I just need to make money. That's how it started. And that obviously wasn't a big driver, because money is not a good motivator at the end of the day. It's good to maybe get started, but money alone isn't going to get you anywhere, and it's really not about money. But at first, that's what I thought I needed to do. I'm like, I need to make money so I can pay off my bills and not go back to my old 9 to 5 and just, achieve that freedom, chasing freedom. And I think once I started making a little money, you kind of realize that nothing changes, nothing really changes. And I'd say my purpose now is just to be a successful human being. And what I define as success is just different. And I think success to me is being like a successful brother, a successful son, successful friend, a successful community host where I'm helpful and useful to people, a successful partner, so that I can be a successful husband someday, and a successful father, and a successful in my faith. And I think the 3 pillars that I now look at are, of course, the physical, the spiritual, and the mental, maybe the business side of things, where, you need to keep working to achieve your goals. And I think success can only be defined as the ability to achieve your goals. And if you can achieve your goals, you're successful. If you look at, say, a monk, right? Some people would say, if you define success as money, the monk is the opposite of successful. But the monk is probably more happy and peaceful and filled with joy and love than anyone else maybe in the world, right? So they are successful because that's what they define success as. Mm-hmm. So for me, it would be those 3 pillars I kind of look at. If I'm taking care of my body, if I'm training, if I'm pushing myself, I feel satisfied. I go to bed happy. If I'm not, if I'm falling into traps of, temptation and weakness and laziness, that's when I don't feel successful and happy. So I'd say those are the 3 pillars I kind of look at. And then if I'm looking at ways to track them, impact, income, and fun. I've mentioned this to you before, but they're kind of 3 pillars of a good life we kind of look at. Are you having an impact on people? If you're having a positive impact on the world, chances are you're doing something right. And that's one of my main things that makes me feel good about myself. Can I have a positive impact on people? Then am I making an income? And some people negatively have associations with money, or positively over associate with money. At the end of the day, you need to make money to grow your business, to take care of your loved ones, to make everything else happen. Money is a pillar of life. So income and then fun. Am I actually enjoying life? Am I going on adventures, spending time in nature, experiencing the world, and things like that? And also, I'd say for me, something I've been trying to do better is not being too invested in the material world, where I'm too focused on the things that I want and the things that I desire, and more focused on maybe the inner side of things and the what happens after, right? Because you can't, when you die, you don't take any of this with you. And so I'm more focused on being a better person nowadays. That's kind of another goal of mine. And when I'm working towards that better version of myself, that self-actualized version of myself, that's when I feel successful. And I'd say that's my purpose. Summing it up all into one word, I think, into one sentence, I think my purpose that I wrote down not too long ago was to gain the ability to make other people's dreams a reality. And that's something that just really struck with me. And when I wrote it down, I'm like, shit. Like, I put it on my wall. I'm like, damn, that's what I want. I want the ability to make other people's dreams a reality. And I think that's what I'm working towards every day in this world. That's a bit of a long-winded answer in terms of purpose. Kind of touched on a few different points there, but hope it was interesting enough. What questions do you have about that?
I mean, it was incredible. And for not thinking about it before this moment, I think you articulated it really well. And I could sense you processing through it in real time. And it felt super resonant, and it feels very aligned with who I know you to be. Like, two traits were coming up for me about you when you were speaking. And the first trait is that you truly love being of service. Like, you want to help other people, and you're okay if it's not about you. So on the surface, and I would love to go into your astrology chart sometime and try to like understand this from that angle. But on the surface, you're this guy who grew up Twitter following, had some momentum, and now you've taken 5-6 months away from tweeting. You're just completely behind the scenes, but you're completely okay with that because you're in your purpose and you're serving people. You have the humility, and that was the second word, humility, where it's not about you, it's about service. And I don't know, those are two things that I just really see in you and I admire about you, because in this world of the creator economy and social media, like, we want it all to be about us. I fall into that. Now, I'm a Leo sun, so it's kind of in my nature, and we could talk about astrology another time. But it's in my nature to want to be the center of attention. But from my Aquarius moon perspective, I see you as being so of service, and it strikes a chord in me. And I think it's what makes you so successful in what you do and attracts so many people to want to work with you, because yes, you're in it for yourself. You want to make money for yourself, of course, but that is secondary to the service that you're doing through whatever business you're creating and whatever community you're in. So I just want to reflect that. That's what I see, and like double down on that, because it's a superpower and it's not common.
I think you hit something important there, in the idea of service. And I think the hardest times of my career were when I was pushing for attention and trying to force things, where I'm growing a Twitter following in order to reach a means to an end of driving traffic, right, to an offer, for example. And when I was doing those things, it was like more about me. It's like, me, how can I sell this person? How can I reach that next stage of business growth? How can I get another client? How can I make this thread go viral, or whatever it is, right? How can I help this client achieve X result? And it becomes a lot about you, where it's in terms of what you want. And I think one thing that helped me was forcing the frame of, and a mentor instilled this belief in me. So I can't be I can't take the credit for it. But he told me when I started with Kirby, he's like, dude, project indispensable. And I mentioned this to you earlier. That's your goal right now. Just be indispensable. And I think that's the idea of service. When you're indispensable to people, you up-level your skills, you get better at what you do, you get people good results, because you're looking and you're actively searching for ways to be more useful and to provide better services and better experiences for the people you work with. And because of that, you get better at what you do, you deliver better results, they like you more, you get more referrals, and the other side of the business grows. And speaking in terms of Twitter, when I was writing on Twitter, it was an attempt to grow a community and to sell offers for that Twitter space, right? But then it evolved into, okay, I don't need to do that anymore, because all I need to do is be useful to the people I have, and everything else works itself out. Why would I focus on growing an audience, which is really a means of traffic? Like at the end of the day, we're not growing an audience to be famous. To be completely honest with most people, you do it to grow and to drive traffic to something, to grow a business. That's the main purpose of an audience for an educational creator, besides the pillar of course, changing behavior and impacting people and sharing your passions and things like that. But I didn't need to do that. Like, I don't need to get more clients. I don't need to just try and focus on growing. I'm good with what I got. If I can just deliver amazing results and get really good at what I do, everything else falls into place, and you find more people wanting to work with you and things like that, right? And it was after I did that, and I went all in on like just being indispensable and useful and helpful and developing my skills and getting really good at what I did. Then other people who I thought I would never have a chance of connecting with started calling me and wanting to work with me and things like that. And I actually entered a new space where it was time to say no in order to focus and say no to these opportunities that I once would have like just shoved my head against the wall for. So I think if someone could take a lesson from that, a piece of action, if you can find ways to truly be useful, good things will happen. You give and you shall receive.
Yes, straight from the Bible. That's incredible. And I think it's interesting as well for the listener to understand different angles and different perspectives. So how I see us differentiated a little bit is, you made the comment of most people don't grow the audience to be famous or reach a lot of people. They do it to drive traffic to the offer. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that your mind works in a way of its product offer first, which is like the service first. And then what are the ways to accomplish that? Okay, the audience is one of them. I entered the game from actually the other angle, and it's just in my psychology to be like, I want to be a creator, a writer, and share ideas. And I could build a business behind this. I didn't even know that. So I think it's really interesting for people to hear both sides because they're so valuable, because your usefulness, your skill set has landed you life-changing opportunities and set you up for a career that, I mean, you're never going to have to work a 9-to-5 job another day in your life. Like, you have the connections, the skill set, the network, cross fingers. No, I believe in you. And you did that from focusing on usefulness in business first, whereas I focused on authenticity and creativity and self-expression. And then the usefulness and service came as a byproduct. So I think for the listener, it might be important to know who you are in your core. If you're more of a business-oriented offer service type of guy, great, double down on that. If you're more of the artistic, creative, expressive type, double down on that, but also learn the other side so that you're not the starving artist.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dilemma there, because there's the starving artist who just focuses on, say, the artwork, and they focus on growing an audience, and then they reach a point where it's like broke influencer syndrome. You know, they have an audience, but they're struggling to pay their bills every month because they don't have anything. They're relying on, say, AdSense. And then there's the other side. There's the businessman with no soul. And you don't want to be either of those people. And I think it is important to exist in the middle. Maybe I misrepresented some of the things that I wanted to there. I do think, though, that if you don't have it figured out, if you don't have an idea, it's good to creatively express yourself and kind of build in public to find that realm. I see a lot of people, and if we're looking back on Twitter specifically, you know, when I started out, and I didn't grow a big audience for myself at all. I only had 3,000 followers, whatever. But when I'm looking at all the people I started with, and you can probably relate to this, and a lot of creators can 100% relate to this. You start at zero, right? Everybody starts with 0 followers unless they say buy an account to start with or something like that. And you start with other people in your network who are also small and figuring things out and building their skills. And I remember I talked to a lot of people who all had the same dream as me and wanted to make this thing happen. And we would network in chats, you know, Telegram groups, whatever. And now I see the majority of them, like I'm talking over 95, 99% have failed out, right? And that's because they never unlocked the business side of things. So it is an interesting dilemma. You know, you don't want to be the starving artist. You don't want to be the businessman with no soul. And I think you can kind of merge them together in terms of being useful while creatively expressing yourself. I got lucky in terms of like my passions and interests. I got started because I loved writing. that was my passion. That was my interest. I wanted to write. And I still have a goal of, writing a fiction novel in the future. And we can talk about that more in the future. It's probably a different topic. But that's what got me into it, the idea of writing. And then the business opportunities kind of evolved. And now I'm existing in a place where I'm working out of my passions as well, in terms of community hosting and meeting people and just having interesting, insightful conversations and things like that. So yeah, definitely be aware of those two sides of the coin and be aware of who you are and try not to fall into either of them. It's good advice.
Yeah, I love this little topic we're on. And I'm thinking about, like, at the highest levels of business and art are synonymous. There's actually no gap. Like, what made the iPhone revolutionary? It was a piece of art, right? What makes, if I think Dan Koh's website, an entire brand, the great business that it is, it's the design and aesthetic behind it. So I think at the highest levels of the game, business is art. I actually have a module in my course I'm creating called Business as Art, to talk about this fusion, right? How can you design a beautiful aesthetic? How can you express yourself creatively and authentically, but also know marketing, offer creation, funnels, product creation, client acquisition, client retention, so that you can be at that middle way. But you mentioned earlier a little bit about a mentor. And so what came to mind for me is, you mentioned before we hopped on the podcast, you had the opportunity once to have a lunch with Sam Ovens. So for everybody out there, Sam Ovens is the creator of School. He also built consulting.com, great YouTube channel, wealth of knowledge, wealth of wisdom, really successful founder and successful guy. And so something incredible about Aidan is he's tapped into this network of really high performing entrepreneurs. And you mentioned you're like, I don't want to say I'm buddy friends with Sam, but
definitely not.
I am interested, if you're open to sharing, like, from that one conversation, being at lunch with Sam Ovens, like, that's a pretty cool thing. What did you learn? Like, what did you pick up through osmosis? What did you notice about him that you adopted for yourself or took in as a new mental model or way of thinking about the world or business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, definitely it was, in terms of context, I was in LA, and it was part business trip, part fun trip. Got to go to Disneyland, have some fun, which is part of the good things of this online game. You can have opportunities to just go and have fun, right? And then I was also meeting up with Kirby, and we were working on a few projects. So I went down to School HQ and got to have lunch there with the team and Sam. And I'd say there's a lot of lessons that I've picked up from, in terms of osmosis, from Sam, just in that moment, and also through Kirby, who works much closer with Sam, right? And a lot of stuff from Sam filters through Kirby to me. It's kind of like that hierarchical ladder. And one of them that just came to mind, just off the top of my mind, is that a lot of people create problems, and the easiest way to solve a problem is to realize it's not a problem. And that might sound silly or counterintuitive, but a lot of people create problems in their life of, like, why they can't do something or what's holding something back. And they create this idea of a problem they have to solve. And the easiest way to solve that problem is to realize it isn't a problem in the first place and just move on to the things that actually matter. Kind of a tough topic to wrap your head around. Took me a little bit to accept that as an idea. So I'll move on to something a little more concrete. And that the second one, which is, a lot of people can probably appreciate this and realize this already, but in terms of focus. And everyone says be focused, Hormozy, ignore the lady in the red dress, talks about that a lot, the lady in the red dress. But Sam is so focused, you can see it in his eyes. He is, like, intense. You look in his eyes and it's like that's what he looks like. He's just incredibly focused, and everything about his life is engineered to support that focus. And even the way he has, like, his work setup designed, one, very creatively, aesthetically expressed. If you ever get the chance to visit School HQ, I think you'll really appreciate the aesthetics of the building. It's like the opposite of corporate. It's very fun and community based and very cool. Like, there's an astronaut and there's, like, all these cool things there. Just an amazing space to hang out in, which is one thing I love about that school community. Sorry, I let myself get off track there thinking about the school community. Bring me back.
Yeah, things you picked up through Sam. So the mental model of the easiest way to solve a problem is by not thinking it's a problem. That's in it. That had me going in my head.
Mm,
I love that. And then the focus. So maybe we could
yeah.
double down on the focus. Like,
Yeah.
what do you think it is about him that keeps him in that level of concentration? Like, what separates him from everybody else in that domain?
Doing it for 20 years probably, and actually doing it for 20 years, and probably going to do it till the day he dies. I think that's, at the end of the day, it's just repeated action on his part. And even if you look at his lifestyle design, he uses the same productivity system for the past 20 years or however long. And I'm throwing 20 years out as a number. I don't know how long it actually is, but he uses the exact same systems. He has the same desk setup. He has the one plug he plugs into his computer to connect to his monitor. Like, everything is dialed in terms of what he likes and what works for him. So one thing I took from that is I kind of adopted his productivity system from Kirby. And it's like literally so simple as you have the projects you need to work on that are highest priority now, the things that are works in progress. So they're not worth thinking about. You don't think about them yet because they're not highest priority, and then things that are finished. And he kind of bases everything around that from what I've seen. And again, this is just from my observations. It's opinion. It's not don't take everything as fact here, but it's that idea of picking literally the most important thing and then focusing on that till it's done, and then seeing, okay, taking a step back and thinking, what's the next most important thing? And I think a lot of us get pulled into this mess of, again, using that mountain analogy. We're looking at the mountain way ahead and we're thinking, oh, I'm going to need crampons and an ice axe and this big pack, and I'm going to stay 3 nights or whatever. And they start thinking so far ahead, it overwhelms them. And maybe they start working on all these different actions, primary, secondary actions, instead of focusing on that one thing that matters. And when you focus on that one thing that matters and you do it, maybe you see, oh, you keep walking down the path, you accomplish that one thing, and there's a little shortcut side path that you never would have seen if you didn't do that one thing first. So that's one thing, I'm saying one thing a lot. One thing I learned and I actually implemented into my life and business is trying to spend more time defining the one thing I need to do next, doing it, and then finding the next thing. And instead of thinking of how Synthesizer, the community, will look in 5 years or 10 years, or creating it into a sellable asset or something like that, just thinking about, okay, my next step is setting up calls, or my next step is doing the next phase of the roadmap, or my next step, setting up this event, or doing this. And then how can I make that as good as possible, make that as amazing as possible? And then what's next? And just one step at a time through that focus, and applying focus in the idea of taking one step at a time has been really helpful for me in terms of, overcoming overwhelm, overcoming distractions, being more productive, getting more done in less time, and actually driving the needle towards what you need to do. And I think that's something that a lot of these CEOs think like. It's like they're not focused on these. You think a CEO is thinking what the company is going to be like in 20 years from now. I think a lot of them, from my experiences, they're more focused on the next immediate step and what can they do to make it as good as possible. And then what's the next step? And just one step at a time. And in 10 years, you build something amazing. School wasn't monetized or was losing money for the first few years Sam was running it. And he was completely okay with losing money and not trying to grow it, because he just wanted to make the product as great as possible. And once the product was good as possible, then he's okay, maybe we can start telling people about it. And then that's the next step. And so those are a few of the lessons that I took from that had an impact on me.
That's great. Yeah, I think this topic of focus is of high relevance for everybody in the world, but also myself. It's as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a founder, right? You need the big picture vision, right? That's what creates unique innovation, right? But can you control and sharpen the mind enough to do the one thing in front of you right now without the mind wanting to go over here, go over here? And then you have 5 different things open, 5 different windows, 100 different browsers, and you're like, I don't even know where I'm at, right? It's like, have the big vision, have the vision of the universe you want to create, but come back to here and now, and then training the mind to stay at that task. It's like an active meditation. It is hard. It's really hard. So, I mean, for you, what are your practices like around that? Like, because you strike me as a very orderly thinker and a very sharp mind. Like, you're able to stay focused on task for a long period of time. Like, what are your practices around that? How do you maintain focus? Like, what supplementary habits do you have?
First of all, I don't. I'm not that I don't have habits. I'm not or always orderly and focused. I oftentimes get distracted and I'm not optimally productive. And I've had periods of times where a few months go by where I'm just like feeling like I'm in a rut. So for everyone listening, you know, nobody's perfect. I'm far from perfect. I have a lot of growth to go in terms of focus and productivity and performance and everything in business. I'm just trying to share a little bit of my journey, first of all.
There's that humility again. I love it.
Well, it's true. And in terms of some things that have worked for me, I've done elaborate routines and morning routines and like different breath works and walks and exercise and cold plunge. I just recently mentioned to you, I did a 20-day cold plunge challenge, things like that. But I'd say oftentimes it comes back to the fundamentals. One of the fundamentals for me is removing distractions in your work life. So that means for me, I've tried to get used to using one monitor, one browser, one thing at a time when I'm working. And sometimes you see these productivity work setups and it's like 4 monitors and like 2 computers and like their phones here. And for me, it's like, okay, that just overwhelms my brain. And it's hard because I like having the distractions of the different things. But what I've kind of evolved the space to is I just can pull it up here. I have this one notebook. Funny enough, I took it from the school office. Someone at the school team gave it to me. samsoldconsulting.com notebook. And all I do is every day I start a new page Wednesday today, and then I write down my to-do list of what I need to do to have a accomplished successful day. And that's it on the page. And on my desk, I have my laptop connected to my monitor, and then I plug it in so I can turn my laptop screen off. If I do need the second screen, I'll pop it up. And if I'm doing some Slack huddles or something, mouse, keyboard, glass of water, coffee, that's it. I put my blinds down. I try and focus on it. So hopefully I don't kill the plant putting the blinds down. You know, my room, I try and keep clean, neat, tidy, no mess in the life. You know, relationships, I try and keep them clean, tidy, neat. If something's messy, I try and fix it right away or prune it off. You know, I try and keep everything clean, neat, and tidy in my life. And that tends to reflect into my work and my business. And then in terms of productivity focus, found mornings are really important. One thing I've done is on my phone, I bought this thing called a brick, and I'll just tap it before bed and it locks my phone for everything. So I can't access it. Because I found if I have an alarm on my phone in the morning, you know, you check your alarm and next thing you know, you start by checking messages from the team or community updates or emails. And then next thing you know, you spend 2 hours lying in bed just responding to shit, or even worse, you just start scrolling. So that way I can't even look at my phone in the morning. Like, it's unusable. I can't even open apps. So I'm forced, if I want to do anything, I have to sit at my computer and actually get into work. That's one thing that's been helpful for me. Second is, you know, I use a sunrise alarm clock instead of my phone as an alarm clock. I really focus on sleeping at the right time, sleep, exercise. If I don't exercise, everything else goes to shit. You know, for a while, 6 months, I was just focused on working on the business. You know, I got to work 10, 12 hours a day, work, optimal. And then I realized I was losing so much productivity and performance because my body just wasn't keeping up and I was getting out of shape and it just was killing me. So actually setting aside 1 to 2 hours to exercise and push your body every day, that's been super helpful for me. In terms of my day setup, how I help myself achieve focus, I will try and wake up early but naturally, so I don't force myself out of bed with 5 hours of sleep. I'm a 9 hour of sleep guy. I like my 9 hours of sleep. Wake up kind of naturally, get out of bed, either sit down to work right away or go for a little walk, sometimes cold plunge if I need it. Try and get 4 hours of work done. By that time, I need a bit of a break. Go train, hit the gym, go to train on the mats, jiu-jitsu, or go for a walk or a run or something. Just get outside, come back, clean off, have my first meal around 1, 2, and then get back into work after that. And I try and focus my creative tasks that hit those main priority items in the morning when I have the most focus. And then in the afternoon, evenings, I try and focus more on the moderation and the tasks that I can just kind of do without heavy thinking. And then final practice that's been helpful for me recently, I've just adopted this, is the idea of the MIQ, or most important question. Forget the guy who brought this up. It was on a Huberman podcast, but ending the day by just writing down one question on something that you need to figure out. And it could be like, what's the next phase of this course look like? Or what's the next phase of business look like, or life, or something you've been struggling with, and then going to bed and just sleeping on it. And then waking up, you often find that your subconscious mind has worked on it and you have new ideas, and you wake up kind of energized. So I'd say the things you put into your body before bed, incredibly essential. If you're playing video games or watching Netflix or things like that before bed, that kills my morning as well, I've noticed, because then that's in my mind and my subconscious. I go to bed almost thinking, dreaming about, oh, how can I beat this next level, or what's happening in this movie. So when I end with the focus on the business and life and what I'm working on, then I wake up with that front of mind as well, and it helps me get into work right away as well. And those are just a few little rambled, thrown together things that I do, just top of mind.
Yeah, man, you're super dialed. And even your energy picked up a lot when you were talking about it. Like, this is something you're quite passionate about. And I mean, I took some gems from, for sure. I used to be the peak performance guy.
Yeah,
That was my whole brand.
I remember.
And then I went to Thailand and disregarded all of that. And so my process right now has been, how do I integrate the intuitive flow that I learned to tap into there and through some other adventures with orderly productivity? So it's why I love having these types of conversations, because, in my free time, I'm usually going and reading some super esoteric type of books. But at the same time, a huge part of me absolutely loves this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it's a balance. I'm not always super ordered, and I try and keep, like I said, mornings for work and then training and things like that. Oftentimes my days don't follow that regimen, and it's not strict in that sense. Like, if I'm taking calls, I try and just open up my whole day and just allow people to pick a time and do calls, and then I just focus on doing calls the day and get it done. Like Mondays for me, I have a lot of calls, so I kind of focus on get as many calls as I can on Monday. And sometimes if someone books in, then I might miss a workout, or I might miss my morning work block, or things like that. And I think it is a balance, as in all things. I think having the structure can be really beneficial to some people who are like struggling. It's because it forces them, it tells them what to do at different times. But if you're kind of like a little more in tune with yourself, and you kind of figuring things out, you know what you need to do, and you can kind of just go with the flow, where you're like, okay, I'm tired, I've worked hard, it's time to take a break and go for a walk or hit the gym, or my body's not feeling it today, I'm going to take it a little easy, or I got to go to bed a little early. Or if you're really in the flow, I talk about sleep being important, but if I'm really working on an exciting project, I've stayed up till 6 a.m. just working on it, because I need to finish it, right? Especially if I have a deadline. I'm like, I said I'd get this done Thursday. I need to get it done by Thursday. It's Wednesday night. I'm not done because something happened. Okay, I'm staying up and finishing it. So there is definitely a balance. And I think for the viewer listening to this, if your daily life isn't perfect and you're not optimized and structured and you're feeling shit about yourself, don't worry about it too much. I don't think any of us actually have it all figured out.
I love that point. And the reason I love asking about productivity and workflows is, like, what you just outlined for us is an ideal that you shoot for, but like, we're human, right? Unless you're a monk, or like you literally have no no temptation, no chaos in your life, it's impossible to stay 100% adhered to that. Now, some people are so rigid in it, like, and so determined, like a Hormozy type. Which we can all admire and look up to. But I think you hit a really good point. Like, if you're not super dialed, that's okay. I am not dialed. I was telling Aidan, I'm relatively dialed. Okay. I can sometimes be a bit hard on myself. But I was telling Aidan about how my life is very chaotic right now. Actually, it's like, oh my gosh, I have all these classes in football, and I'm doing podcasts, and then I'm running a cohort, and I'm building these new things. And so I ask these questions about productivity and workflows because it inspires me to double down on that because I know it's very important, and it gives me something to shoot for. And then life inevitably gets in the way and things become chaotic. But if I don't even shoot for it, then it's just like absolute chaos, right? So I think it's a middle way. It's a balance.
Yep. And Hormozy has a thing that inspired me, which is, you want to have as many peak performing as many good days in a row as you can. And you're never going to have unlimited good days in a row. Even he doesn't. And he's like arguably like one of the most dialed entrepreneurs in the world. He's super dialed. But you want to have as many good days in a row. And I've noticed in terms of chaos often happens when new things are thrown into your life, right? For me, traveling induces a lot of chaos. You got to find new times to work. You're exploring, adventuring, fun. Out of your workspace, there's chaos. It's harder to get things done. It's good to unwind and whatnot. But getting back to order is very helpful. That's another kind of lesson I learned from Sam. There's almost nothing that can throw chaos into his life. Like if you're looking at his life from an outside perspective, he has his place dialed, he has his office dialed, he works at the same time. It's like there's no space for chaos. So when you remove space for chaos, you kind of inevitably force yourself to be more productive because you're removing the things that could pull you off track. So I'd say that's another thing to kind of keep in mind, removing as many distractions and also recognizing the era you're in. Being everything you're working on right now, you're kind of in a season of chaos where you don't really have much you can do about it with like school and football and cohorts and podcasts and things like that. For me, I'm in a season of grinding and building where I can structure my days and my weeks, where I can tell people, listen, I'm not going out, I'm not doing this, I'm saying no to this, I'm saying no to travels. I could be traveling, right? But I know I'll get more done if I work at home because I have my office set up. I know I can wake up at this time, work at this time, I have this space, and everything's good. Right? There's not much room for chaos in my life. So because of that, I can get a lot more done. And I think it's kind of like recognizing the season you're in. And when you have an opportunity to go all in and be focused and ordered and as productive as you can, it's like an interesting challenge. I think every guy, every entrepreneur, not just men, should try and find those moments where they can go all in and just see what they're capable of and see what they can build when they're truly focused. And I think most people never actually scratch the surface of being focused. They have so much going on in their lives. And I can say that because I'm speaking from experience and I've had a lot of shit going on in my life. And then I end my days feeling like I got nothing done. You end your day and you're kind of laying in bed and you're thinking like, what did I get? I worked all day. I did stuff, but what did I actually do to move the needle? And it's hard to pinpoint that. And when you can find an opportunity to really delve into the depth of your soul and unveil what you're really capable of in terms of those, like, say, 3 pillars, classic pillars of your spiritual life, your physical life, and your business and your work life, is really incredible. And you're never going to scratch it. I feel like I'm hardly scratching the surface of what I'm capable of, but that pursuit is inspiring and motivational.
That's incredible. And you're 23, right?
Yeah, 24 in about a month. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. We're both 23. It's going to be cool to like look back on this in 30 years and be like, dude, like, well, that was so fun, first of all. And like, look at us. We were just kids. And like, oh, we didn't have to worry about anything the whole time.
Yeah.
That's how it always is in hindsight.
Yeah. Your problems weren't really problems. That's kind of another lesson that I mentioned earlier. Looking back, those problems, they weren't really problems. And even for us looking back now, just 5 years ago, if I'm looking back at me being in the hospital bed, you could say that was a really big problem. I was like, couldn't even walk, right? Like I was fainting just standing up, but that drove me to where I am today. So I'm really grateful for that. And I'm like, that was a pivotal moment of my life that I would never change. And I'm like grateful for that. And that problem is actually something that changed who I am and pushed me to where I am today, allowing us to even have this conversation. So that problem wasn't really a problem at all.
That's incredible. I think I tweeted one time, it was like, there's actually no problems. There's simply just things happening. And then we label them as problems. But things are just happening in reality. And now some things are not as ideal as others, right? Like laying in a hospital bed, that's not ideal. That's not what we want to be. But from some very zoomed out perspective, it's like something is just happening. in that moment. And we don't know why, but you wouldn't have been on this journey you're on and here today without it, like you said.
Yeah, I go so far as saying suffering is a blessing. And I definitely believe that. And faith is definitely important as well. And faith in the path, right? Like we talked about that journey, the path you're walking on to reach your goal, the mountain peak. And when that path diverts and you can't see the peak anymore and it gets dark and you're in the forest and the trees, one of the things that helps you have faith sometimes is seeing that someone has walked the path before you and you kind of believe it, right? And I think that's why, again, coming back to the tangible side of things, it's like that's why courses and roadmaps from people who have done it before you and they have the proof and multiple people have walked the path, it's more believable. You're more likely to take action on it, right? So just coming back to the faith that you're in the right place, everything is going to work out, and don't worry about it too much is just good, like simple, easy life advice that everybody kind of knows, but it's easy to forget.
Most definitely. Bro, I feel like that is a beautiful way to end this. There's so much more we could dive into. Like there's so many other things I had written down that I would love to go into, but I think with you and I, we can go pretty intellectually deep on just a few things. And then it's like, oh, an hour and a half has passed. Like, what the fuck? So I think this is a prerequisite for maybe like quarterly episodes. Maybe we check in every 6 months to do an episode. We'll see. We'll know when the timing is right, but I would absolutely love to do this again, intermittently throughout the years. And yeah, man, I'm super grateful for your time and for your wisdom and for our friendship. It's been fun to grow and evolve with you and witness your evolution from an outside perspective. It's incredible and it's inspiring. And I think people got a lot from this if they listen to the end.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think looking back, I was a kid who had nothing figured out not too long ago. And I still have basically nothing figured out. I'm a few steps ahead of that person now. And looking back, I'd kill for the problems I have today. And to be where I am today, I wouldn't have even be able to see that mountain peak. It was like I was looking at this peak and then I climbed it and I realized, oh, there's another peak behind it that I couldn't even see, right? So I think just to end on that, great place to end. There's a lot of doors we could open. There's a lot of depth we can dive into. One simple topic like the classroom of a community could be an 8-hour episode. The landing page, the about page, the onboarding experience, anything in all of these topics, faith, performance, productivity, workflows, systems, all of that is huge channels of discussion. But I think we had a fun one. It's always fun talking to you. You ask great questions. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. And everybody go follow Aidan on Twitter. He doesn't post right now, but I sense that inevitably at some point he's going to be posting again.
Yeah, maybe. And feel free to check out Synthesizer. It's a free community, by the way. So you can check it out for free. And we're always happy to have people in there.
Cool. Awesome, bro. Thank you.